It's time to select another nation to investigate in Football Manager. How about the gateway to Eastern Europe and resplendent Hungary? There's the nation's capital, the districts of Buda and Pest, playfully dissected by the River Danube. Now don't be put off by the tuneless warbling of George Ezra. Both Budapest and Hungary are places of beautiful architecture. This is a nation where the government retain the right to veto the name of your child. But nobody minds because the locals are busy relaxing in one of the thousands of spas that the country boasts. Or they're just too tired to complain after a frenetic water polo match. Nice hats, by the way. This is a nation where people love nothing more than to create inventions that they name after themselves, such as Laszlo Biro, Erno Rubik, and Clive Goulash. In hindsight, Goulash probably was not invented by someone called Clive. But anyway, we're here to discover whether Hungary is a fitting destination for your next Football Manager adventure. So let's jump straight into the League Lowdown Guide to Hungary. So in this League Lowdown we're off to Hungary, and as usual we've enlisted the help of some experts to help us compile it. This time thanks must go out to FM Greeno, who has his own FM YouTube channel, links are down below. Greeno has travelled and worked extensively throughout Hungary, taking in many games, and his partner is Hungarian as well, and will surely be rolling her eyes at some of my pronunciations. And we've also got to thank JDHFM. Jambo is doing a Hungarian save for FM21, which he will be blogging about. The amount of research that he has put into this nation is absolutely eye-watering. And again, head to the descriptions down below for links to Jambo's blog and social media handles as well. But without further ado, let's have a look at the league structure in Hungary. The top flight in Hungary is made up of 12 clubs. Sometimes when a division is so small, they have some complex league splits that you need to get your head around. Not the case in Hungary. The teams play each other 3 times during the course of the season, creating a 33-game campaign. Only the champions qualify for the Champions League, and there are 2 teams that at the bottom of the season are automatically relegated out of the top flight. So no promotion playoffs in Hungary. They're relegated down to the second playable division, a much bigger division in Hungary, those top 2 teams being automatically promoted and 2 teams dropping out into the unplayable leagues in Football Manager. So that's how the league works. But we need to have a look at the clubs that you could take charge of, starting with, arguably, one of the biggest in the region. Perhaps the most familiar name in Hungarian football for many fans will be Ferencvaros, who have a very neat and tidy 22,000 capacity stadium. They're currently sitting top of their domestic league and won the last 2 titles as well. They've qualified for the group stages of this season's Champions League, which is only going to increase their financial muscle further. And for a club from this part of the world, well, they don't have too shabby facilities with top corporate facilities, only average training facilities and average youth facilities, but their exceptional youth recruitment means fans of bringing through academy prospects and installing them in the first team might want to take a look at Ferencvaros. They've now got 31 league titles, 23 cups as well, and a little bit of European success, having won the 1965 Intercity Fairs Cup, a forerunner to the UEFA Cup, as well as reaching the final of the Cup Winners' Cup in 1975, where they were defeated by Dynamo Kiev. And speaking of Kiev, one of their former sons, Sergei Rebrov, is the current Ferencvaros manager. This is a team that has a pretty heated rivalry with Újpest from across the city, as well as some of their other Budapest neighbours. But if you like taking charge of a nation's dominant team and trying to make European glory your main pursuit, well, Ferencvaros might be a team for you, but they've got some other teams in the nation that are trying to pose a challenge to their dominance. Perhaps the main rival to Ferencvaros at the top of Hungarian football over the last few seasons has been Fehérvár. Granted, they don't have the infrastructure or the stadium capacity that Ferencvaros have, neither do they have the trophy cabinet that's quite so brimming with silverware, but over the last 10 years or so, they really have started to assert themselves as one of the dominant forces of Hungarian football. Until 2011, they'd never won the top division, but they've now won it 3 times, and since 2006, they've added 2 Hungarian Cups as well. So if you're looking for a club on the up, this might be one for you. Their history dates back all the way to the 1940s. In the 1980s, they reached the UEFA Cup final when it was still played over 2 legs. They lost 3-1 to Real Madrid, but actually beat Madrid 1-0 in the Bernabeu, showing that they have got some pedigree when it comes to European competition. Now, this may be a name that's not quite so familiar to some people. That's because they've undergone lots of rebrandings over recent years due to different commercial tie-ins. They were formerly the club known as Vidie Oton, so if you've seen them competing in European competition, well, that is the club now known as Ferencvaros. They're not the only challenger that we might look at if we're trying to take on Ferencvaros, however. And that's because there are a couple of teams in Hungary's top flight that could be considered to be punching above their weight and providing a renewed challenge to the traditional names in Hungarian football. One of those clubs might be Paksi, a team that only qualified to play in the top division in 2008 for the first time, but by 2012 were qualifying for European competition. They're a small club. They've just got a 4,500 capacity stadium, but they're currently sat second in the table and are the closest threat to Ferencvaros right now at the top of the league. But there is another club that have bounced into the top flight this season on the back of several promotions in recent years. And that team is Budapest, a small club from the outskirts of the capital Budapest who have navigated their way through Hungary's lower leagues over recent years, and last year it culminated with them being promoted to the top flight. They are run by an Australian-Hungarian businessman who also runs Melbourne Victory, and under his stewardship they have gone on an unprecedented run, bouncing through Hungary's divisions, and are now currently sat comfortably in mid-table of the top flight. So if you like the idea of taking charge of a less established name and taking on some of those historic clubs in Hungary, well, there's a couple of options for you, but maybe we should have a look at some of these historic names that you might prefer to take charge of instead. Hungarian football has no shortage of historic names, and one of those clubs is MTK Budapest, a team that are now currently back in the top flight of Hungarian football, having yo-yoed between the top 2 divisions over recent years. But this is a club that reached the final of the Cup Winners' Cup back in 1964, where they lost to Sporting Club from Portugal, and they've won the Hungarian Cup 12 times, the most recently being on the turn of the millennium, and they've also won the top division 23 times as well, 2 of them coming fairly recently. But financial problems at the club have seen them suffer relegations, promotions and further relegations again. Maybe you're the manager that can finally take control of them and restore them to the top of the domestic game. Or maybe you prefer to take over one of the other clubs from the capital and Ferencvaros' fiercest rivals, Újpest. This is a club that plays in a small 5,000 capacity stadium, but don't let that fool you. This is a club with quite a little bit of history. They've been in the top flight for 108 consecutive years. They've won the top division 20 times. They've won the cup 10 times as well. And they've been European finalists throughout the 1960s and 1970s. Now, they are owned by the Duchesne family, who also own Charlton Athletic, but if you can ride out that little misdemeanour, then Újpest might be an interesting historic club that you can take to challenge their rivals from across the city. But perhaps no club conjures up images of grainy black and white footage of European football from yesteryear quite like Honved, the club most famous for Ferenc Puskás, arguably. This is a team formerly associated with the Hungarian army, and one that has experienced success throughout its long and illustrious history, winning cups in the 1920s and as recently as 2009, and also winning the top flight on 14 different occasions, the most recent being just in 2017. So if you like the teams you take charge of in Football Manager to be ones with a little bit of history, pedigree, and a rich past that they can boast, well, Honved might be the team for you. Developing youth prospects in Hungary is hindered to some extent by the financial restrictions that many of their clubs face, but there is a team that was founded for this very purpose, and that club is Puskás Academia, who were originally founded as an academy club for Ferencvaros, but now compete in the top flight of their own right, and in recent years their focus has been more on competing in the top division through their transfer policy rather than the development of youth prospects. But inside of that, they do have some quite interesting facilities. Excellent youth recruitment, good youth facilities, good training facilities as well. This is a club that provides the embryo of an infrastructure that you could produce some top talent at. They've yet to win any titles or cups in Hungary's top flight, but they have got a superb, albeit very compact stadium built for them by the president of the country, who's pumped a lot of money into Hungarian football, and this club built a stadium in his hometown. So if you like the idea of trying to develop your own Hungarian youth talents, well, Puskás Academia, who by the way have no links to Puskás, he of course played for Honved, but they took his name anyway, and if you like to develop your own talent, this could be one of the smaller clubs where you could do it. In a nation where so many of the clubs have experienced financial hardship that has led them to slip down the divisions, it's no difficult task to find sleeping giants in Hungary. One example might be Greeno, who are now back playing in the second division, but were relegated down to the regional leagues due to financial irregularities. But this is a club that has been at the top of the Hungarian game. They've won the cup 4 times during the 60s and 70s, but if you look at their league titles, of which they've won 4, well, the most recent was in 2013, but shortly afterwards they experienced financial meltdown and they were demoted to the regional divisions, but they're back in the second flight now. They're a playable team in FM21, and you could guide them back to the big time, but there's plenty more sleeping giants to choose from. A club that were unplayable in FM20 but are back in the second tier for FM21 are Pécs, a team that when they were demoted down to the 4th division due to their own financial problems, while fans invaded the pitch and buried a coffin in the centre circle to mark the death of the club. But they're back in the second division now, and they have one great afternoon in their history when they won the Hungarian Cup in 1990, but they've got fans that are hungry for more success. Maybe you're the manager that could deliver it. A club that's a sleeping giant because it's on a downward trajectory might be Debrecen, who were relegated out of the top flight last season, but they've got a 20,000 capacity stadium. They're potentially one of the biggest clubs in the country, and they've spent a little bit of money trying to make sure that they bounce back to the top flight. At the first time of asking, they've won the Hungarian Cup 6 times. They've won the league 7 times as well. You'll see that all of those have come in the last 2 decades. This is a club that seemingly was establishing itself at the top of the game, but last season's relegation means that there's some work to be done. Maybe you're the manager that could do it. But if you like clubs in the second division that you can guide back to the top tier, then maybe Vasas might appeal to you. Again, this is another club that in previous eras was racking up the trophy haul. They've won the cup 4 times in the 50s, 70s and 1980s, and they've won the top division as well, but not since 1977. They're currently languishing down in the second tier. They've got quite a small stadium with just 5,000 capacity to it. But if you like the challenge of taking one of those smaller clubs that has experienced better times into the top flight and into Europe, and who knows, maybe to the top of the European game, then Vasas is one of the clubs that you could check out. But that completes the League Lowdown guide to Hungary, a nation that is certainly competitive in footballing terms and one with no shortage of historic clubs and sleeping giants that provide some great challenges for fans of Football Manager. We're going to see you next time when we make another nation the focus of our next League Lowdown.